want to welcome you. This is the third in our Getting Started series. And this is intended for brand new folks. It's intended for those of us who have to teach. It's intended for those of us who have pretty sophisticated skill sets, are new to DP2. Maybe you've been brought in, to design a specific system, or you're going to be programming, or you're part of the IT group. So if you joined us in the other two, you'll remember I kind of painted 3 scenarios. And this is the third scenario, just as kind of a starting point, where somebody sits you down in front of DP2 and all the windows are already open. So you are confronted with, what can I close? What do I have here? What am I looking at? Because I'm going to start with the menu items, and I'm going to stick to the same convention that I used in the other two, and then I'm going to try to work around those buttons and menu items that are used commonly, especially in the beginning. I'm going to start at the menu items, and this time I'm going to start with window, and I want to talk a little bit about that window menu item. And you can see many of the windows that I have open, and I have a lot, and usually when I see this in labs I always have a moment, I'm like, ooh, got so much open. But I have a lot of different windows open, but there's certain windows that I don't see in this list. I want to talk a little bit about the way in which we control these. So we do have this close all feature, which will close a lot of different windows. And I'm going to use it to close them, but I want to use this also as a moment of reassurance, especially if you're new to DP2. If something isn't saved, DP2 is going to ask you. If it's an operational window that we're not going to see in this list, as an example, the render engine control window, which we can see right here, right, does not appear in my Windows list. I can bring one window on top of the other. But what will happen is, in the cases where, like the render engine control, it'll stay on top and it will stay open, and you won't be able to interrupt that work unless you actually go in and stop it. So I'm going to go ahead and do window close all, so you can kind of see, and one of the things we'll be doing after this is I'll be walking through kind of opening up not this many windows. So I'm going to use the window close all. There are a couple of other places that you can get to this. One of them is in select order, which I'll talk about in just a minute. So I'm going to close all, and what it's going to do is it's going to close. Here it is. I did not save this layout that I was working on, and it's going to stop and say, do you want to save changes? I'll go ahead and say yes. And then it's going to continue on and close the other windows. There are a series of windows that it didn't close, and those are the ones that I want to talk about. These are also the ones, some of them were in the list and some were not. So I had export images open, and that was not in the list. So DP2, I minimized it. DP2 did not close it. And we do this so that you're not going to close down work, or you're not going to interrupt work that's ongoing. The render engine control window, and I'm just going to minimize these for now. These are workers, and workers is a very particular workflow in DP2 that does a certain type and a certain amount of work. The workers, although they do show up in that list so you can bring them forward, workers don't close when you do close all, for the reason that I just mentioned, and that's so that you don't shut yourself down. Right? You don't interrupt work and so on by inadvertently closing them. The only other way you would be able to do it is by hitting the X or double clicking on the DP2 logo. So that's just that first way of kind of helping yourself if you are confronted with that. Unless you don't save something that needs to be saved. That's also true for the data tables. DP2 will stop, it will ask you, and then it'll clean up your environment. I'm actually going to close the select order so that I can kind of show you where that came from and how I got there. In the I have all my categories open because, of course, I was doing some things beforehand. But I'm going to go ahead and go to the order entry taskbar. And just to revisit, the order entry taskbar is one of the many different categories in DP2 that represent different workflows, different feature sets and functionality in DP2. By default, when you log on to DP2, if it hasn't been assigned by an administrator, or it hasn't been set up by someone else in the, production person in the lab, this is where it'll open. The select order opens up a separate window, and what you can do here is you can type in the first couple of letters. I'm going to again use the sample order, which I did discuss in the other videos, so that when I open up that, I'm going to use the enter key to open up the order data table, the order images, and the order items. And I'll just revisit slightly. This is the order data table, which houses the information that we understand about the order itself. The order items, of course, are the jobs, right? That combination of the product, the data, and the image, the order images, and the order images themselves. The reason that I'm going to focus especially a new user here is because you can get to almost all of the different features and functionalities that are order related, the basic ones, from this one drop-down menu. So that if I hadn't used the enter key, I could have opened my order data table, I could have set a status, and I'm not going to stop today to go through each one of these individually because I want to do this overview piece. And again, so I could have opened order items. We have a system in DP2 called workflow, and workflow can be really important to a new user. If your lab is using workflows, it's going to allow you to see your work organized in a very specific way. So as an example, if I go to order items by workflow, what's going to happen is instead of seeing all of those jobs together, and your lab might be organized in a way that will allow you to look at the work. So these are standard prints. You can see it opened multiple windows. These are different types of prints. These are packages, right? These are luster, which is, of course, a paper surface. These are all different types of work that potentially, and these are just examples, right? Deluxe prints, and these are basic prints, those kinds of things. But it will allow you to look at the jobs and to potentially run the jobs, all of the jobs that run within a particular workflow that's been defined by your lab. And we do have some other videos and other information as well as the help, which explains how those work. So as we look down at the select order, there are certain other pieces of functionality in DP2 that are related to the order that you can get to from here. And I strongly recommend that you use this because we'll just go back and I'll close all, right? I'm going to leave my other things open. So when you're in select order, if you don't need to see all those tables, you don't need them. Don't need to look at them. So if you are color correcting or only looking at images, you only need to look at the images, and you don't need to have anything else really going on your screen other than maybe some of these functional, like the workers or the printing, the render engine control window, if you should happen to have that. One of the other interfaces that I want to show you that's available from Select Order is called Navigate. Navigate's been around for a long time, but it makes a really good scenario for the new user and for the users who just need to do a few things inside an order. What it's going to do is it's going to allow me to open up the Navigate window. I can see here's a list of all the images that are in the order. It opens up the image. It doesn't open up the greater table. It just opens up the one image that I'm concerned with. I can change my crops from here. So again, I have a list of crops. Most labs do. So if I need to change the crop, I can save that. And then I can do that on an individual image. I could actually copy this crop and have paste. If I had my images window, I could have pasted it to all of the others. That type of functionality, I can use Retouch to open up Photoshop if I'm using that as my editing program. So these are the types of things that are really available to you from Navigate. We can also, there's a workflow called proofing, which if you were to select proof, it would allow you to select a proof layout. And if I were to say yes, then DP2 is going to go ahead and it's going to create those in the background. And that's really the gist of what we're talking about today, are those things that can take place in the background that I don't have to look at, doesn't take up any more real estate, but I can actually go ahead and run those from here. And there, again, this is DP2, so there's a couple of different ways to do everything based on user preferences, the most comfortable way for you to be looking at work. I can change the status. So if you're a lab that uses statuses, and we encourage labs that have systems for kind of understanding status and where something is in the lab and are using those kind of tools in DP2. These are the statuses that we have in here by default, and it's a two states. It's the state of it's waiting to happen, and then the state of it's in process or finished. So as an example, if you had the order had run but you needed to go back, and there was a particular image that you knew, this particular image, I need to rerun this work, maybe I need to fix the crop, I need to do something. I can also then, right from here, by using the little arrow in the lower right-hand corner, I can select what is it that print is that I need to run, and I can go ahead and add that print, and it'll add that to the order items. so that and that would behave just like any order item. I can also, run my items from here. I could look at them and run them. So if I wanted to see, did that one that I just created, so that I can go ahead and look and see, in fact, there it is right there, in your lab. Once you've kind of adapted to this type of a workflow, then you could simply run that right from here, and it would go ahead and run all of those order items. So this is one example of a quick way to get a particular type of work done. So I'm going to just close that and close that. I also will highlight that I used my orders, and so my orders is the ability to use the Windows logon to see all my own work. So if you're a lab that's using Windows logons, we automatically populate the owner field with that user logon so that I can come in here and look at just my work. And there's a couple of different places that exists. I added it to my composite, but it's a good example of a way to organize work so that I'm not doing a lot of searching. I can just look, and these can be assigned, right? They could either be automatically assigned, or the lab could go in when the data is created and assign an owner to it, so that as a production person, or as a person who has to maybe adjust images or do some other color correcting, you can just go into My Orders and it's right there. I'm going to also take a quick look at the order query menu. I think this gets overlooked a lot. Order query menu allows, and this is actually where My Orders comes from, by the way, it's there by default. Order query is a really good tool in DP2, because what order query does is it allows you, these are all default queries in DP2, so you could look at orders on hold or high priority ones or orders due today. That's all based on setting it up in your lab so that you create the opportunity for us to do a query and look, future orders, past due orders. It really depends. And I mentioned earlier, right, needs adjustment. If you set it up so that when a order is brought into DP2 and it's flagged for adjustment, then your color correcting staff, of course, or you as a color corrector could just go in and look at which orders need adjustment. So you can just search it, and you can make custom ones as well. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to actually stop. My next stop is at the printing. I want to talk a little bit about running order items. I think from here you have the ability to run order items, and this particular window is another one of those windows that it's been there forever, but it does allow you to get right to the order you need, so that if you're in a situation where somebody says, oh, I just need to run this, and you don't need to open the order, you don't need to do any of those things. I'm simply going to do the same thing I did before, which is I'm going to go down. I just typed in the KA. I can change the queue. So let's say one machine has work on it and I want to shift what I'm running here to another machine. So maybe I'm sending it to my 12-inch queue. If you have a product that you access some sort of image or order separator, maybe it's got text on it or something else that you use as a separator print, you can identify that here. And it tells me at the bottom right there, it said there are 6 orders. When I hit this question mark, it says there's one queue that begins with 12-inch. If I hit this question mark, it says there's one product that begins with image separator. What happens in here is I can just type in what I need. So I'm going to view the data. Now you may already have this information, right? Or you may want to run everything, or you may only want to run certain work. So I can say, I want 1 to 7 and give it a comma, and then I want, 10 to 15 perhaps. And what's going to happen is I'm going to go ahead and run those order items. And DP2 is going to say, are you sure you want to run those 13? And I'm going to say yes. And again, it's going to queue those up. I don't know if that's render engines running or not, but we could probably look. So that I don't have to do anything other than go right into this window. But we have the similar things for production people. There are certain ways that I think, especially if you've been kind of asked to step in and you have a busy lab, I'm going to go ahead and just double click and close that. I can go ahead and look at a job queue summary as an example. So if I have a number of different jobs going, so it shows me, here's my job queue. These are all the different job queues I have, and it shows me all those job queues, and perhaps I need to, from an administrative standpoint, I need to be able to see the number of batches, the number of items, approximate number of feet, or the time to print. I think these are all kind of from that high level view, these are things that are really good to have an understanding. You have access to it, you can see it, and you can get to it. One of the other areas that I want to talk a little bit about is if I'm a color correcting operator, or I'm adjusting, or I'm in the more of the front end of the workflow. So I'm going to go back to order entry, and I'm going to take a look at what we call a global adjust images. So global adjust images is, again, it's another one of those places where we have the ability to kind of do an adjustment to an entire order, you know, or only the roles, you know, certain roles. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. In this case, though, I'm going to type out my sample order, and I'm going to view it just so that you get a feel for how that works. In this case, I'm going to mark it as all roles, and I'm going to say adjust the selected order or role. And what that's going to do is it's going to give me access and it's some control points for being able to do a global adjustment kind of across the entire order, or just one role in the order. In this case, I chose them all, but you can see all the images, just the color images. So as an example, maybe I don't want to make the correction to black and white or sepia. I just want to make an adjustment to the color, or maybe it's a density issue and I want to do it across the board, and I can make a change and I can apply that change to everything. I can go and update it, I can set it, and then I can refresh. So it's, again, it's just one of those tools in DP2 that's going to allow you to do a number of things just at a high level without opening a lot of windows. Thank you again for taking the time to spend with me this afternoon. I really appreciate it.